The HR manager slid those photos across the table like she'd caught me committing a federal crime. And in that moment, something inside me went completely still. Not broken, just quiet. People talk about loyalty, about being part of the family, but the same people will throw you out over a $23 bottle of oat milk creamer without blinking. They thought they were ending my career that afternoon. They had no idea what I still had the power to take back. If you've ever been blindsided at work, tell me in the comments, and please subscribe so you don't miss what happened next. I walked into SkyPath every morning like someone who believed hard work still mattered. Not because anyone there made me feel important, but because the systems I kept alive were the only reason the company functioned at all. Most people never noticed me unless something broke. Trent, my supervisor, would stroll past my desk without a nod. But the moment a shipment lagged or a route misfired, suddenly he knew my name. That was the rhythm of my days. Quiet competence wrapped in constant invisibility. Still, I showed up. I kept the fulfillment schedules moving, tracked inventory for 4 states, and solved problems before anyone else even smelled the smoke. I learned early on that offices like ours ran on 2 things: caffeine and the backs of people no one bothered to thank. My workspace sat in a corner near the server room, a place where fluorescent lights hummed and the air always felt a little dry. People hurried past without stopping. No small talk, no recognition, just the same nod of expectation that I'd fix whatever they didn't understand. And I did. I always did. There's a strange kind of loneliness that comes from being essential yet overlooked. You hear every conversation about budgets and promotions, the whispers about cutting costs, the way management praises efficiency but refuses to invest in the people maintaining it. I saw those signs long before anything happened. Trent kept hinting at organizational restructuring. HR hosted mandatory trainings about ethics and resource accountability. Marcy from HR would pop into break room conversations just a second too long, smiling like she knew things no one else did. Even when nothing was wrong, everything felt just a little off, like a room where the picture frames are tilted, but you can't describe how you know. Still, I kept my head down and worked. I didn't complain when my workload doubled. I didn't argue when Trent shrugged off my requests to document our systems. I'd mention the risk of having no backup personnel, and he would laugh and say, "Dana, you worry too much. Everything's fine." Everything was fine because I kept it fine. That was the truth no one wanted to admit. But something shifted the week before it all happened. A meeting I wasn't invited to but should have been. Conversations that abruptly stopped when I walked by. The feeling of being watched, small glances, scribbled notes, Marcy passing my desk twice in an hour without a reason. People like to act like betrayal happens suddenly. It doesn't. It brews quietly in small choices and ignored instincts. That entire week felt like the air was tightening around me. Not in a dramatic way, just enough that my chest sat a little heavier every morning. Even so, I kept working. The system updates went out on time. The delivery maps refreshed smoothly. The inventory dashboard stayed green. I knew how much all of it mattered, even if they didn't. And the most ironic part? On the very day they fired me, I had already fixed 2 problems before anyone else arrived. They never noticed. They never asked. They never valued a damn thing. But they were about to learn exactly what holding their company together had cost me, and what losing me would cost them. The summons came through a calendar alert I hadn't expected. A 2:15 p.m. meeting with Trent and HR. No subject line, no agenda. Just a location. Conference Room C. My stomach tightened, but I walked in anyway because that's what you do when you've spent years being the person who fixes problems no one else can see. The room smelled like reheated coffee and old carpet cleaner, the kind of scent that sticks to cheap office spaces. Marcy was already seated, hands folded neatly over a manila folder. Trent leaned back in his chair, wearing a grin that didn't belong in a professional setting, not unless someone else was about to suffer. "Dana," she said, tapping the folder as if she were conducting a slow drum roll. "We have a serious matter to address." She slid 3 glossy photos across the table. At first, my brain didn't process what I was staring at. Me, the break room, my ceramic mug with the chipped blue rim, a bottle of oat milk creamer tilted over my cup. Each photo had a timestamp glowing yellow, 7:18 a.m., 7:22 a.m., 7:29 a.m. 3 random mornings compressed into evidence. This creamer, Marcy said, pointing with a manicured nail, is reserved exclusively for clients and external partners. It costs $23 per bottle, and based on our surveillance logs, you've taken it for personal use 56 times. That totals to approximately $180 in unauthorized consumption. A laugh almost escaped me, but it caught somewhere between disbelief and nausea. This wasn't a joke. They were serious. Trent crossed his arms, leaning farther back. "We've been monitoring this for a while," he said, like he'd uncovered major corruption instead of a woman adding a splash of creamer to her coffee. "It shows a clear pattern of disregard for company resources." My voice felt trapped under a weight. "You think I stole creamer?" Marcy's expression hardened just enough for me to understand she wasn't looking for truth. She was looking for closure on a decision they'd already made. "We're terminating your employment effective immediately," she said. "You'll need to sign these forms, surrender your badge and laptop, and security will escort you out." Escort. The word hit me harder than the accusation. Escorting someone implies danger, threat, wrongdoing. It paints a picture before you even get a chance to speak. "Is this really happening?" My voice trembled, not from guilt but from shock. "This is your justification?" Trent's smirk widened. "We've been reevaluating performance and culture fit. This just made the decision easier." Culture fit, the phrase people in power use to disguise their discomfort with anyone who threatens their comfort. I stared at those photos, the ridiculousness of the accusation spiraling into something monstrous. Not once had they questioned me about it. Not once had they asked why the creamer mattered when I'd spent 4.5 years keeping their operations from falling apart. Marcy pushed a pen toward me. "We need your signature." My hand shook slightly as I picked it up. The ink dragged unevenly across the page, each letter feeling heavier than the last. Trent watched me sign like it was entertainment. "Don't take it personally," he said. "These things happen. Companies evolve. Roles change." His shrug held the cruelty of someone who believed consequences never boomeranged back to the person who set them in motion. When the paperwork was done, a knock sounded at the door. Eli from security stepped in, eyes lowered. He'd stopped by my desk last month asking for help resetting his login. Now he was here to escort me out like I was a danger to the building. I gathered my things in silence. Eli followed me through the hallway, past people who glanced up quickly, then looked away just as fast. Shame spreads like a scent in corporate hallways. Fast, invisible, lingering. When we reached the lobby doors, Eli murmured, "Sorry." It was barely audible. "Not your fault," I whispered. But the truth was, every step felt like a punishment for daring to exist quietly in a place that thrived on hierarchy and control. They thought firing me over creamer would be the end of the story. They had no idea it was only the beginning. The parking lot looked different when you no longer belonged to the building behind you. The same cracked pavement, the same faded white lines, the same delivery trucks humming in the distance. Yet everything felt hollow, like someone had scooped out the center of my life and left the shell standing. I sat in my car with the door still open, the cardboard box of my belongings slumped in the passenger seat. My mug, my half-dead plant, a photo frame that suddenly felt heavier than the rest. The air tasted metallic. I wasn't crying, not exactly. My eyes just burned, like they were trying to understand a reality that still felt impossible. Fired, escorted, accused of unauthorized creamer consumption. I kept hearing Marcy's voice echo in my head, sterile and rehearsed, a tone she probably practiced in HR certification workshops about difficult conversations. And Trent's smug expression, that was harder to shake. He'd look satisfied, almost relieved, like this was something he'd been waiting to do. The signs had been there, scattered through the past months, but it's always easier to interpret the clues when the story's already over. I sat there for 20 minutes, maybe longer. Cars passed, employees walked back from lunch, someone laughed near the loading bay. Life inside that company kept moving without me, as if I'd never been a necessary part of it. And yet I knew, deep down in the quiet center of myself, that none of them understood how fragile their world actually was. When I finally closed the car door, the thud felt like a chapter sealing shut. At home, the silence settled around me like a blanket. Not comforting, just present. I dropped my keys on the counter and stared at the stainless steel kettle, suddenly craving tea, not because it would make anything better, but because it was something familiar I could control. English breakfast, 2 minutes steeped, splash of store-brand creamer. Nothing fancy, nothing that could get me fired. I sat at the kitchen table with my personal laptop in front of me. For a while, I didn't touch it. The login screen glowed like an invitation and a threat, depending on how I looked at it. This machine held everything that SkyPath never valued. My thinking, my planning, my work, my late nights, my solutions to problems no one else could even describe. I hadn't kept backups because I didn't trust them. I kept backups because I respected myself more than they ever did. When the screen finally unlocked, it felt like opening a vault. My hands hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't act yet. Shock still pulsed through me in quiet waves, anger coming in small, simmering breaths. They fired me over a bottle of creamer. They decided I wasn't worth the cost of oat milk. And they expected the company to run the same without me. I needed clarity, not impulse. So I called Carla. She answered on the second ring. "Dana, you all right?" That single question cracked something open. I explained everything, the photos, the accusation, the escort, the suddenness of it all. Carla listened without interrupting, but I could practically hear her eyebrows rising. "Did you sign an intellectual property transfer that extends past your employment?" she asked. "Only the standard clause," I said. "My work belonged to them while I was employed." "While," she repeated, her voice sharpening. "Past tense, Dana." She paused, then asked, "Did you build everything from scratch? No templates, no third-party systems they owned?" "All mine." "And did they ever implement your recommendations for documentation or redundancy?" "Never." Silence, then a low exhale. "They put themselves in this position," she said, "and firing you ended their rights to ongoing use unless there was a separate agreement. You're not obligated to maintain or support anything." My heart thudded once, hard, not from fear, from recognition. Something in her tone told me I wasn't as powerless as they believed. "Do you still have administrative access?" she asked. "Most likely," I said. "They're thorough about punishing the wrong things and careless about everything that matters." Carla snorted. "Then revoke your access immediately. You're no longer an employee. You're under no obligation to leave your credentials active on systems that contain your proprietary work." After we hung up, I stared at my laptop again. The screen felt different now, not an invitation, but an ignition switch. The moment before the engine turns. My hand steadied, breath evening out. The humiliation had happened. The shame had settled. Now came the part they never saw coming. They thought the afternoon ended when security walked me to my car. But this was where the real story began. The cursor blinked in the corner of my screen like a quiet dare, the kind that tests whether you truly understand your own worth. Carla's words were still in my ears, steady and certain, so different from the hollow confidence Trent always tried to fake. I wasn't acting out of revenge. Not then. What I felt was clarity, a clean line drawn between what belonged to me and what I no longer owed them. My fingers moved before the fear could catch up. I connected to SkyPath's VPN out of habit more than anything else. Part of me expected a denial message, some automated lockout confirming they'd cut me off the moment I stepped out of the building. But of course they hadn't. Trent and Marcy were meticulous about petty rules, but the things that mattered, the systems, the safeguards, the groundwork beneath their entire operation, those had never been their priority. The connection loaded instantly. The familiar dashboard stretched across the screen, waiting for me as if nothing had changed. Except everything had. I navigated to the admin console, the same one I'd used countless times to protect their operations. fix their outages, and prevent the catastrophes they didn't even know they'd narrowly avoided. My credentials still sat at the top of the hierarchy. Full access, full control, full responsibility. Until the moment they tried to pretend I didn't matter. I clicked Revoke Admin Rights. A confirmation box popped up, bland and emotionless. "Are you sure?" I whispered. "Absolutely." And pressed enter. My name disappeared from the list. Then I revoked my user login. The system asked me to confirm again, as if some part of it didn't believe I would actually go through with this. Once I clicked yes, the access dissolved like it had never existed. Next, I shut down the authentication engine entirely. The heart of the system didn't crash dramatically. It simply halted, a quiet stop that would ripple through every part of their operations like a power outage in slow motion. 90 seconds. That's all it took for my entire connection to go dark. No alarms, no frantic alerts, just silence. A different kind of silence from the one in the car earlier. This one carried weight, not shame. I closed the laptop and sat back, letting the moment settle. No triumph, no guilt, just truth. They fired me. They severed the contract. They removed the obligation. And I had simply stepped out of a structure that could no longer claim any part of me. The first call came little more than an hour later. Unknown number. I let it ring. The second came 3 minutes after. Same number. Ring, pause, voicemail. My phone buzzed again at 5:15 p.m., this time flashing Trent's direct line. I answered, not out of curiosity, but out of a strange calm that had taken root somewhere beneath my ribs. "Hey," he said, voice too bright, too forced, like he'd been practicing enthusiasm in a mirror. "So funny thing, about earlier, maybe we were all a little tense. You know how it gets." I let the words hang. He tried again, faster. "We'd love for you to come back tomorrow. Full pay. We'll even stock whatever creamer you want." Beneath his forced cheer, I heard background chatter, urgent voices, frantic tones. Something was already unraveling. "No thank you," I said. Silence hit the line like a dropped weight, then a different tone, strained and cracking. We need you to return. There's a technical issue. Systems aren't responding." "I'm no longer employed there," I said. "I can't access anything." "You can't. What did you do?" His voice climbed in pitch, panic leaking through. "Revoked my credentials," I said. "Standard procedure when someone leaves a company." More voices in the background now, sharp, frustrated. Someone, Marcy maybe, said, "Tell her we'll pay her double." But the price no longer mattered. They'd chosen the moment they escorted me out, and now the moment belonged to me. The calls didn't slow down after Trent's panic slipped through the phone. They multiplied. My screen lit up over and over again like the universe was tapping insistently on my shoulder, demanding I look back at a place I had already left behind. I set the phone face down on the table and finished making dinner, the kind of calm, ordinary movement that somehow felt like rebellion. Let them scramble. Let them realize what it meant to strip someone of value and expect the world to keep turning. The first voicemail came from an unfamiliar extension. A man's voice, strained, clipped, trying to sound professional while holding back urgency. "Hi, this is Mark from IT. We're experiencing a system-wide credential error. Could you give us a call?" I didn't. The next message arrived minutes later, sharper, from Marcy. "We need to speak immediately. This is a serious matter. Ignoring us will only make things worse." Worse for whom, she didn't clarify. The silence on my end was answer enough. By the time I finally picked up, the sun had set and the kitchen lights had warmed into a soft glow that made everything feel strangely peaceful. My phone vibrated so hard it nearly slid off the counter. Victor's number flashed on the screen, the CEO himself. That alone told me the situation had escalated beyond anything Trent or Marcy had anticipated. I answered. "Dana," he said, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "Thank you for picking up. I'll get right to the point. We're facing a critical outage across multiple divisions. Fulfillment queues, order routing, inventory visibility, all down." His voice was controlled but fraying at the edges. I could picture him in his glass office, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up for effect rather than usefulness. "We need your help." "I'm not an employee anymore," I said. "I can't assist with internal systems." "We can compensate you," he said too quickly, generously. He paused as if waiting for me to rescue him. When I didn't, he added, "Name your rate." I almost laughed, not out of cruelty, but out of the absurdity of it. Hours earlier, they'd decided I wasn't worth a $23 bottle of creamer. Now they were bargaining for the survival of the company. "I'm not available," I said. A long silence followed, then a quiet, strained please. Something in his tone made me imagine the chaos unfolding on their end. Orders piling up unchecked, delivery routes stuck, warehouse teams frozen because the dashboards they relied on had gone dark. Systems people take for granted until the moment they stop. Another call buzzed in as I hung up, this time from a consulting firm I recognized from industry news, Apex Technical. I let it go to voicemail, but when the transcript preview flashed on my screen, curiosity tugged me into listening. "Ms. Clark, this is Gareth Monroe with Apex. We've been engaged to assess SkyPath's architecture. We understand you were the primary architect and may have documentation that would assist in rebuilding. We are prepared to offer consulting compensation for any materials you can provide." Materials, documentation, as if those things existed simply because they ought to. I called him back not to help, but because some truths deserve to be said out loud. "There is no documentation," I told him. Gareth hesitated. "None?" "None. I requested time and resources to build it, repeatedly." He cleared his throat. "I see. In that case, could you provide a high-level overview?" "No," I said calmly. "I don't work for them." When I hung up, the quiet in my kitchen felt different. Warmer, fuller, as if the space around me understood something fundamental had shifted. The final round of calls came late that night. Trent's tear-soaked voicemail. Marcy's brittle apology wrapped in corporate language. "It's frustrated, please." And then one more email from Victor, the subject line stripped of pretenses. "We need you." I closed my laptop gently, almost tenderly, the way you'd close a door on a chapter that doesn't deserve another sentence. They weren't calling because they valued me. They were calling because they finally realized what losing me meant. And for the first time in years, I didn't owe them a single thing. Morning light filtered across my kitchen table as I scrolled through my inbox, each new notification a reminder of a world scrambling without me. But between the threats, bribes, apologies, and thinly veiled desperation, one message stood out. Calm, professional, and completely unbothered by SkyPath's unraveling. The sender, Renee Calder, Vice President of Operations at VantageCore Logistics, SkyPath's toughest competitor. The subject line was simple. Opportunity to discuss. Her email didn't mention outages, emergencies, or missing documentation. Instead, she wrote that VantageCore had been watching SkyPath's unusually efficient turnaround times for over a year and assumed they had a full team of engineers behind their systems. Now that industry chatter suggested those systems had been built by one person and that same person had abruptly parted ways, she wondered if I'd be open to a conversation. No flattery, no pressure, just respect, the kind I hadn't felt in years. We scheduled a call for 2 p.m. I spent the hours leading up to it reviewing nothing. Not notes, not code, not old frustrations. Just breathing in the unfamiliar feeling of not being afraid. When the clock hit the hour, Renee's voice came through steady, warm, assured. "Dana, thank you for speaking with me. I'll be direct. We want you here, not to fix something broken, but to build something new." The distinction hit with more force than I expected. She continued, "We're constructing our next-generation logistics architecture. We want you to lead it. Full creative control, a team built around your vision, and compensation that reflects your contribution, not just your presence." Then she gave the number. It was more than double what SkyPath had ever paid me. Before I could reply, she added, "There's another component. If you've developed proprietary frameworks or logic independently, we'd like to discuss licensing. We're prepared to offer a one-time payment plus a royalty percentage tied to performance gains. My breath caught, not in shock, but in validation. For years, SkyPath treated my work as invisible scaffolding. VantageCore, in one conversation, treated it as value. "I'd need my attorney to review everything," I said. "Of course," Renee replied. "We encourage that." Encouraged. SkyPath weaponized their contracts. VantageCore respected boundaries. After the call, I forwarded the agreements to Carla. She phoned me less than an hour later. "Dana, these are clean," she said. "Transparent, fair, protective of your rights. Honestly, some of the best I've seen." I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot that had been there for years without my noticing. Carla hesitated before adding, "If you want my advice, step toward the place that sees your value before they're forced to." I signed the employment contract first, then the licensing agreement. The digital signatures glowed on the screen like quiet triumphs. Within minutes, Renee replied with a welcome packet, parking instructions, building access codes, even a lunch invitation for my first day. SkyPath was collapsing in real time, begging, threatening, unraveling. VantageCore simply opened a door, and I walked through it without looking back. The official offer from VantageCore had barely finished downloading when my phone lit up again, this time with Victor's direct line. For a moment, I considered letting it ring like all the others, but something in me wanted closure, not for them, but for myself. So I answered. "Dana," he said, voice worn thin. "I'm calling personally because this situation has escalated beyond anything we anticipated. Trent and Marcy have been terminated. The board is furious. What they did to you was unacceptable." The sudden moral clarity would have been amusing if it hadn't been so predictable. People in leadership seem to find their conscience only when the consequences arrive. "I appreciate you telling me," I said evenly. "We're prepared to bring you back," he continued quickly. "Chief Technology Officer, full autonomy, 200,000 base salary, equity, a corner office, a team built however you want. Just tell us what it'll take." Hours ago, they'd insisted I wasn't even worth the price of a bottle of creamer. Now they were rebuilding thrones out of fear. "I've already accepted a position elsewhere," I said. He sucked in a breath so sharp I could almost picture him gripping the edge of his desk. "We'll match their offer," he said. "No, we'll exceed it by 50%. Whatever they promised, we'll top it. Money, resources, title, everything is negotiable." "It isn't about the money," I said. A pause. Then quietly, "Then what is it about?" I let the question settle. I let him feel the weight of it. "It's about being seen," I said. "It's about being valued before everything falls apart. It's about a workplace that listens, invests, and respects the people who keep it alive. You had 3 years to show that. You didn't." Silence. Not the defensive kind. Something heavier. Something sinking. "You're right," he finally said. "We failed you, and we're paying the price." For a moment he sounded human, not a CEO, not a man scrambling to save his company, just a person realizing too late what he'd taken for granted. "Is there anything," he asked quietly, "any single thing we can do to make this right?" I thought about the photos on the table, the humiliation, the escort, the smirk on Trent's face, the endless nights I'd fixed emergencies without thanks. "Learn from it," I said. "Invest in the people who know your systems. Listen when they tell you what they need. Respect them before they walk away." He exhaled shakily. "I will," he said. I believed he meant it. Maybe regret can teach where leadership manuals fail, but regret doesn't reverse decision-making. "Thank you for taking my call," he whispered before hanging up. That was the last I ever heard from him. In the months that followed, life expanded into something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. My first day at VantageCore felt like stepping into sunlight after years of working underground. A real lobby with real plants, not plastic ones coated in dust. a receptionist who looked me in the eye, a coffee station with more creamer choices than I knew existed, and a sign that simply read, "For everyone." Renee greeted me like I was joining her at the starting line of something meaningful, not plugging holes in a sinking ship. She introduced me to my team, 3 junior developers eager to learn, to build, to grow. People who treated my experience not as a threat but as guidance. Respect shouldn't feel like a luxury, but it did. We spent the next 6 weeks building VantageCore's new infrastructure from the ground up. Real resources, real collaboration, real trust. And the results showed. Faster processing, cleaner data flow, fewer delays, nearly instantaneous routing. Within a quarter, we gained new clients, many of them refugees fleeing Skypath's collapse. Skypath itself spent 8 months and more than $2 million trying to rebuild what I'd once kept running alone. The patched-together system they ended up with worked technically, but it wasn't special, it wasn't efficient, and it certainly wasn't the competitive advantage they'd bragged about. Clients left, revenue plummeted, leadership churned, their decline stopped being industry gossip and became common knowledge. Some people called it karma. I called it consequences. As for me, my office now has 2 windows and a view of the city. The team I lead has grown from 3 to 8. Someone taped a sticky note to my monitor last week that said, "Thanks for teaching me the new workflow. You're the best mentor I've had." I kept it. When I look at it, I don't think about the old conference room or the creamer or the humiliation. I think about the moment I realized I didn't need Skypath to define my worth. They fired me to cut costs. They thought they were saving money. Instead, they lost the person holding their entire operation together, and I walked away into a life that finally fit the work I'd been doing all along. There's something sobering about realizing how quietly strength grows in the background of your own life. I didn't notice mine forming while I was patching. Systems at 2 a.m. are creating backups because no one else cared enough to learn them. I didn't see it when I documented patterns, tracked decisions, or saved old emails just in case. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was preparation born from being overlooked too many times. And when everything fell apart, that quiet preparation became the only thing I could rely on. Skypath didn't collapse because I wanted revenge. It collapsed because leadership treated knowledge as disposable and believed loyalty could be replaced for the price of a cheaper employee. They thought my silence meant weakness. They thought invisibility meant insignificance. They were wrong. Sometimes the strongest people in the room aren't the ones talking, they're the ones paying attention. I didn't win because I fought harder. I won because I walked away with what was already mine. My experience, my foresight, my ability to build something better when given space. And that's the part I want anyone listening to understand. You don't have to shout to leave an impact. You just have to stop giving your strength to places that refuse to see it. Actionable takeaways? Keep records even when no one asks for them. Protect your work even when it feels unnecessary. Invest in yourself, not the approval of people who forget your value when it's convenient. And above all, trust that quiet preparation creates loud outcomes. How to get started today. Save copies of your work where appropriate and allowed. Track decisions, promises, and patterns. It becomes proof later. Build 1 skill a month that no one can take away. Notice how people treat you when they don't need something. Practice walking away before you're pushed. Have you ever discovered your strength only after someone underestimated you?